Welcome to the Independence by Design podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a business owner and ways to get unstuck from the day-to-day so we can design a business that gives us a life of independence. Leadership and that word gets thrown around a ton. I had one of the most meaningful conversations about leadership and truly what it means to embody leadership. And Jeff West, who was my guest, he has grown and sold his own company. He went through the dot-com bubble. He's been a CEO facilitator for decades. He's got an applied leadership program. And I don't know how else to say this other than you're going to have to believe me. This is not a fluffy podcast, and I took 4 pages of notes about what leadership means and what it is. And you're going to have to check out the show notes if you want to get some of the top 10 takeaways of my notes. You got to listen to Jeff. I'm going to be a different person because of what I heard and the conversations I had with Jeff. And I hope you can take away some good things about what it means to be a leader for you and how to think about your team as leaders and how to actually think about what it means for your business and the impact that you can make. Check out the show notes if you want to know a little bit more about Jeff. Otherwise, enjoy this episode. Jeff, I am very pleased to have you here. I appreciate the time. This is going to be fun. I know it.
Well, appreciate being here. Thanks for asking.
So I know you've been a listener, and I'm excited to have you on. And I don't know if it's like I've been on a couple before too. Like, oh, now I'm on the other side. I'm actually going to be part of the people like that are in their car. I'm going to be in the voice in the car. And I met you when you reached out to have me come to your peer group, which started in tech, which is prior to Vistage. And I just, I have to say that like your view on leadership, business, and life was so refreshing. I mean, we sat down for 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever it was, and I felt like I'd known you for a long time. And so, what is your definition of leadership? I want to start there.
That's a good way to put it. I as opposed to just a definition.
What is it? Yeah,
I believe that. And when I'm talking about leadership, I talk about being a great leader. I mean, there are a lot of leaders out there, right? I mean, and you know them when you see them. They're poor leaders, and I've always kind of compared it to, NFL quarterbacks. If you got a bad NFL quarterback, I mean, you make me an NFL quarterback, I don't care how much money you pay the wide receivers. Mm-hmm. We're not going to be very good. And those guys, they don't last very long. They bounce around until they leave. There's a lot of them in the middle that are okay, but not great. And they're, teams usually about the same way. And then there's those handful that are just exceptional. And that when you see it too. They can take everybody around them and make them better, right? I mean, they make average wide receivers look like all-stars. They can take an offense that with an average or poor quarterback would go nowhere and turn it into, something awesome. The Tom Brady types and the Joe Montanas. And I look at leadership the same way that, there are a lot of people out there with a leadership title, but it's really just the title. They're not taking their people anywhere. They're not taking their organizations anywhere. There's a lot of them in the middle that do an okay job. And the reason why they get away with that is their competition is usually not any better. And then those few that are just elite. And by that, I mean, they make everybody around them better. And I think that's my definition of a great leader, that if you're going to be a great leader, everybody around you has to be better because of it. In business, that means obviously your employees, your customers, your vendors, community you're in. And if you haven't hit that where everybody without exception is better off for you being a leader, then I don't think you're a great leader. But if they are, then I think that's as close to the definition as I'd have for it.
I love it. And what I was trying to explain to, because I talked to a couple clients in my group about your program, and I don't know how to describe my, like when I got out of the coffee shop with you, I was like, since we met, I was like, I just feel like we view the world the same way, have similar perspectives. I've learned a lot already from our engagements, and I just hear the word. I mean, it's the same thing, Jeff, like leadership strategy. It's just is like so fluffy BS. You know what I mean? And like, and so even trying to explain like, hey, Jeff's got this applied leadership program. And people go, leadership strategy, it just all falls short. But like listening and talking to you for hours, I'm like, and it was from your experience that I'm hearing you talk about the business that you grew and sold. You were in a CEO peer group. I facilitated one. You and I talked about different business case studies. And how do you describe, like, because like that, like, and I like how you pulled on that analogy of a football team. Like, how do you get across, like, what does it mean to be better? You know what I mean? Like, and like, what does better mean to you other than when you see it, you know it kind of thing? You know what I mean? It's just so hard to put into words.
Yeah, to me, better means it's just that you're living a fulfilling life, right? I mean, everybody always asks, what's the meaning to all this? And you can go into deep philosophical discussions about that and have done for centuries. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about just being fulfilled. Can I get up and can I take some pride in something I've done? Can I um, look back and it always comes back to people. And are the people that I've been around better off for me being around them? Um, that's a fulfilling thing. And when you can look at that and say, hey, I made a little bit of a difference, I think that's a pretty nice bar to get over.
And I think you wrote this, a good way for the listeners to hear, like, some of your nuanced thinking. You wrote a children's book. Oh, I have it in my girl's room. And I want you to talk about the children's book and the dragons, because I think it could help us get some perspective on what you mean by better, what you mean by fulfilled, and how you think about life. Because, you got a lot of business stories that I want to unpack and how you learned all this stuff. But like, I'm trying to capture the essence to do you justice of how you think about this, because I think your standards for applying what does it mean to make everybody else better, making trade-offs when it's not obvious. You and I talked a lot about trade-offs and making sure you're doing what's right, but talk about your children's book and the dragons, the concepts of the dragons, and yeah, I think it's so fantastic.
Well, over the years, I've got this program called the Applied Leadership Program, and many times during that, people go, "You need to write a leadership book someday. You need to write a leadership book." I'm like, "No, I don't. There are plenty of good ones out there, and I can name a few that a couple that we use in the program actually." And um, my wife and I like to just, we're in Wisconsin, so we like to head someplace warmer in the winter, and we spend usually about a week or 10 days in Mexico every year. And we were flying down last January, and I was telling her that, and she looked at me and said, "Why don't you write one for kids?" And it was like starting a brush fire. I couldn't get it out of my head that, oh, man, how many things would I like to have known that I know now that I really didn't know a lot of them until, even later in life, later than I'd hate to admit that, if you could get kids to see it for what it is early, how cool would that be? And the whole concept of dragons is that dragons in ancient China, way before, centuries before they were these winged, fire-breathing creatures, were nothing more than what the Chinese meant for mental blocks. The things that we get stuck in our own heads were that keeps us from being the best version of ourselves we can be. And so that's what popped into my head right away, was this idea of, well, dragons seem to be popular. Wizards seem to be popular with kids. So, writing a book based on dragons being these mental blocks, and it just took on a life of its own. I mean, we had so much fun just sitting by the pool and, okay, what's the next dragon? It's 10 short stories. It's easy enough, 4 or 5.
Walk through the dragons, because I think they're so awesome. I mean, I was resonating so much about the concept of a dragon being a mental block. You and I don't remember where it came up in the sequence of our conversations, but integration of the shadow self, from like Carl Jung. You and I talked a lot about these different isms that, like, that's what helped me understand how real your perspective was on this. And the dragons kind of integrates with that whole concept of like these narratives, these things that you're trying to overcome to get to a point where you're like awake and aware and just trying to help people. But walk through the 10 and like, and how did you come up with them?
Well, the idea behind the whole book is that it was interesting because as soon as my wife said that, the 10th story, which wraps it all up, and I'll leave that one to the readers if they want to try it out.
Well played.
It popped in my mind right away. I knew how it ended. And now I'll just need to come up with like, 9 stories about how do I get there. And the idea behind it is that each story is based on a dragon. The first one is a victim dragon. This girl that's in the story. There's 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl in the story, and she strikes out, strikes out the championship game for her softball team, and yet she's turning herself into the victim of it, and of course, then the victim dragon Abrix shows up and tries to convince her she's right. Yes, you are the victim. On the flip side of it, I created 3 guardian dragons, one for each of them, and the guardian dragon shows up, and it's this conversation back and forth about how are you thinking and how are you creating your thinking, and is it really true what you're making up? And by the end of that first story, she realizes, oh no, you know what, I made up a lot of this stuff that wasn't true, and I'm really not a victim. And the idea behind each one of those dragons is that I want them to see the mental blocks. The next one is the I can't dragon, and the guardian dragon comes and talks about how if you say I can't, you're right, but if you don't let that dragon rule you, what can you do? And so it was that story after story like that of each one of these things. That my goal is, once these kids see these dragons for what they are, they can't unsee them, right? And at the end of the story, basically, they finally realize that all these dragons there's pictures in the book of them and these fierce fire-breathing dragons and stuff were nothing more than just mental, blocks of their own. They made them up.
Made up. Yeah, made up.
My favorite story of it is, is one of the guys in my business partners group, our peer group. He has a son that's 10 years old, and I asked him if he would, be a test case for me, and so they read it and gave some feedback and that. But he said last winter they're coming home from a basketball game and they were giving one of their friends a ride home, his friends, after the game. And they always talk about, what went well, what went poorly, what can we be better at. And at one point, Asher's friend said, they talked about the defense they were playing. And he just said, I can't. And Luke told me that right away. Asher looked at me and said, Dragon, Dad. Yes, you made my whole day right there.
Yeah.
In fact, he could see it as a mental block. It's it's not this fire breathing. It's just something in her head that if you say that, he said, of course, on the rest of the way home, they had to explain to this kid what they were talking about.
That's awesome.
That's what I hope comes out of it. And from what I've been hearing back from parents and reviews on Amazon, that's what's
I don't know if you know them off the top of your head, but any chance you want to just rip through the other?
Oh boy.
If you don't know, that's okay.
There's the I can't. No, I probably wouldn't get them all right now. Anyway, my wife's favorite one is my wife's favorite is called Whimsy Wing. She's the one that I have to be like dragon.
What I like about the thought about giving these ideas to kids is everybody listening, and we all deal with the same stuff.
Yep.
You deal with very successful owners in your peer group. Especially with the size of companies you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. How fascinating is it realizing that? And I don't know if this, you wrote a kid's book, but everybody deals with this stuff. And what when you're looking at your group or all, you've met a lot of owners, and you and I talked a lot because you've also been one too, and we can get into some of that story too. That's why when we're having our conversation, you just get it because you've lived it. And then not only have you lived it, but you're seeing from the lighthouse too, lots of other people and trends of behaviors and stuff like that. So how, if you were to boil down, someone that is constantly moving forward and succeeding, and maybe you can lend some insight of what you think the word succeed means. Cause I think there's a lot of people that would maybe have, I think your and I's definition of success might be different than others. And so if you were to look at someone they've got it going on and they're successful, how would you describe that person?
The first word that comes to my mind is growth. They're in the growth mindset. They're always wanting to get better. They're always challenging their thinking. They're open to new ideas. It's so easy to get stuck in the knowing mode, as I call it. And those people that they always know And you can't teach them anything. They always have an excuse or a reason why something didn't work, or they always know better, even if you can prove that what they're thinking isn't right. They're just stuck. And the people I know that have been the most successful, and successful doesn't always mean business is successful. I mean, you can do a lot of things right in business and still end up, I mean, by one definition of failure, the business fails for,
Mm-hmm.
it's completely outside of your control. Um, but what it does, it gives you a much better chance to be successful than others in the long run. And success means just that always wanting to be curious, always wanting to learn more, always being, asking good questions. And so I say, that growth mindset is the first thing that comes to mind. And I think that's what always differentiates the really good ones from the rest.
Where does the role of like ego and these dragons play a part in these leaders?
Yeah, that can get in our way a lot, can it? Ego in depending how you look at it, but ego is often one of the biggest limiters of how far we can go. And it works in subtle ways. I mean, when you think about ego, you think about the person that's braggadocio and all, yeah. But it's not necessarily always that. Ego can be a thing where you just can't go have that tough conversation with somebody because
Mm,
your ego is telling you that, oh man, if I go have that conversation with someone, they're not going to like me, and I need to be liked. That's where one of the
dragon,
dragons came from.
dragon. Yeah,
And when you boil it down, it's ego, though, right? It's
yeah.
this fear, and you and I've talked about it. There's a book written many years ago now called "Play to Win" by the Wilson brothers, and they boil it down into what they call the four fears. And they work with tens of thousands of people in business across the country. And the interesting thing was that they came up with that there are only two fears we're born with: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. But then they came up with four more they saw over and over and over and over in people, in businesses, and in life as well. The one is the fear of failure. The next one is the fear of being wrong. The third one is the fear of rejection. And the fourth one is the fear of emotional discomfort, fear of emotional discomfort. And when you work it backwards in any issue or problem you're having, you will, always find it's one or more, a combination of those that's keeping you from being the best person you can be. To go back, I'll admit, when I first started SLE back in 1996, one of mine was, emotional discomfort. It was tough for me to go have that tough conversation with people.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't take too long to realize that if you're running a company and you're responsible for the success of the company, that you can avoid that conversation as much as you want, but sooner or later it's going to blow up in your face. And so it's better just to go have that
The
tough.
longer it goes, the bigger the bomb, too, usually.
Exactly right. Yeah, it gets worse. Doesn't get better. And they don't go away either. It's what you kind of hope that maybe it'll take care of itself.
What
And
was your ism? People are looking for a problem they can't solve versus what is it?
people prefer a problem they can't solve to a solution they don't like.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, that's from a gentleman named Lee Thayer, who I'm sure we'll talk about more today. But
Well,
yeah,
let's double click on that because you mean there was quite a few of these people that you're pulling on, which is why I also appreciate where like these mental models and these concepts you're pulling on people that you've been studying, and there wasn't a huge crossover. I was like, I mean, it was so fun to hear like a list of people and books that I hadn't been aware of. But so what was this person's role in your journey of understanding leadership in business, and what are some of your favorite takeaways?
oh, an hour and a half wouldn't do it for takeaways from Lee. Lee was somebody that, again, through the peer group I heard about, he had been a speaker on the peer group circuit, I guess you would call it that. We never had him with my group, but I kept hearing his name from other speakers, and so I finally bought one of his books. Actually, in my mind, there is not even a close second for best book on leadership ever written. It's called Thinking, Being, Doing: Leadership, Thinking, Being, Doing by Lee Thayer. And I can remember the first couple of times I started to read it, I got a couple of chapters in and I put it down like, man, this is hard. And I just, and as opposed to another book you could read, blow through it quickly, put it up on the shelf, and never look at it again. And finally, it hit me like, why do I keep putting it down? And I thought, because it's challenging me in a way I've never been challenged before. And I made a promise to myself that I'm going to read this thing from cover to cover, and I'm not going to stop till I'm done. And it was revolutionary in multiple ways in the way I look at leadership. And then by pure happenstance, I got fortunate enough to work with Lee for the last few months before he passed away in 2020 at 92 years old. So I
What were things that changed about how you viewed leadership? Like, what were some of the unlocks that made you think differently?
Well, the first one, we talked about already, was that Lee would tell you the same thing, that everybody around you isn't better for you being a leader than you're not a great leader. And that took a while for me to get for it to sink in. But the more I've studied it, the more I've thought about it, the more I've worked with applied leadership, teams or groups that I've had, and read their stuff and talk to them. And, I completely buy into that. That's my definition of a great leader, is that everyone has been better for you being around as a leader. But just sayings. Most people prefer a problem they can't solve to a solution they don't like. That took me a while. I sat there, what the heck does that even mean?
I love it so much.
And then when it hit me, I'm like, oh, we'd rather put up with the problem, make every excuse in the world, than just face it head on. And then I saw them everywhere. It was like the sixth sense, right? You see them everywhere. And that's there's one that leads to another. And if you can get down to the root cause one and get somebody to fix that, the rest of them just vanish. And it's amazing. Another one of his sayings is, success is the only measure of success.
Mm-hmm.
While in a way that sounds simplistic, it has such ramifications for how you lead as a leader. But you take it and think it through, that if success is the only measure of success, and you're not being successful, there are only two reasons, or somebody that works for you is not being successful. There's only two reasons. They're either, one, not competent enough, or two, they don't care. They're not competent. You can work with that, possibly. Number two, if
Possibly.
they don't care, there's not much you can do about that one. And so, it gets back to, those two things, and which, in a way makes it fairly simple. Which one is it? And this whole idea of competence is another thing that really, really came through for me through Lee, that, leaders, I think the best, and I don't know where I remember I heard it the first time, but I think the best definition I've heard for leadership versus management, because many people look at those as the same thing, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Management is working on your business or your organization. And we all have management things we have to do. We got that ka-chunk things that we've got to get through and do. But leadership is working on your people. And that's a completely different way of looking at it, a different position then. And one, I actually find that many people that get promoted into leadership positions, and especially in the case of, and I've had people that come from like a COO position, and the CEO retires and they get promoted into the CEO position. But nobody ever tells them it's a completely different job. COO, you're in charge of operations. So there's a lot of management stuff in there that you've got to follow. The CEO position, especially at a reasonably sized company and bigger, is people. It's people. How do you keep getting your people more competent in every level of your organization?
Mm-hmm.
And many of them they have a hard time switching gears and figuring that out. And until they do, all of a sudden you just basically got a COO running your company. And then you wonder why the innovation goes away, why the vision and the enthusiasm goes away, and because it just turns into a task-based company as opposed to accomplishment-based company.
You and I talked about that, where I was showing you my diagram of like the board, the CEO, and then the three functional leaders right underneath it. And we talked a lot about how that CEO should be responsible through getting the organization to ownership's goals through people of those three other, function leaders, and shouldn't have any tasks. And how many people don't see that, like you said, and it becomes, how difficult can it be to make sure that you're focusing on whether people are competent or not, and whether people care, and moving things through people versus, with a task list. And um, it's fascinating. Like, why do you think? So I've got a couple questions that I think are tied together here, Jeff. Is like, you know, why is this so not obvious? Is part one of the question.
Mhm.
And then, it's tied to part two of the question, which I asked you, which was unbelievably helpful for me and my understanding of the marketplace and kind of dynamics. I asked you in some shape or form was because I am struggling with like watching companies, leadership teams that are just not performing the way that I think that they should be. And I was asking you with how your experience, your journey, your exposure to all this stuff. I'm like, is this a now thing? Like, is it the people, like people will blame the social media, they'll blame, the money system, or they'll blame the hardships, or what you name that, a million things that are all probably tied to dragons. I said, is there an actual issue here? Because you and I both, and we'll get to the 2030, you follow ITR economics and stuff like that. I was actually just talking to Alan Bolio this morning. And I was asking you, is this a now issue where there's a higher volume of this problem going on right now, or has it always kind of been this way? And I think you said it's kind of always been this way. So I'm like, why is it not? Why is this not obvious? Like all the stuff that we're talking about, why is it not obvious? And then, are there trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, well, one of the few advantages of getting older is you get to see multiple decades of this, and yeah, and I'm sure it was before my time too. I don't think it's any different than it has been. And has it gotten any worse? I don't think so. Has it gotten any better? Unfortunately, I don't. Not that I've seen it. I've just got a small snippet of it, but the reason why I think it continues to be such a bugaboo, if you want to call it that, is that thinking about leadership and what leadership means takes a lot of thinking. And I think was it Henry Ford said that thinking is hard. That's why he thought that so few people did it. Um, it's so easy to fall into this management thinking because
check boxes and the
yeah,
dopamine that comes with it.
somewhat the old command and control, and in some ways we've gotten a little better from that. We've start pushing down responsibilities a little bit better maybe, but in many places no. And why is that? I mean, this whole thing about I guess you call it bureaucracy. Why does bureaucracy exist? Well, it starts from the standpoint that we want this illusion that we have control of what's going on, right, as leaders. And so all of a sudden something pops up and we create a procedure for it. And then something else pops up. We just create a procedure for it. And something else pops up because we want to know that it's going to be done the same way, the right way every time. And I've had a couple of companies over the years that I've come in and worked with, and you walk in and their book on procedures is like that. It's just
Like the
huge.
IRS tax code or
It
the,
is.
the law.
And the first thing they tell me is that they just can't figure out why our employees aren't more engaged. I'm like, why would they be engaged when you got every step of every day here what to do in every situation? And that's the problem. I mean, and don't get me wrong, there are certain procedures and rules and things like that. Some for safety. I wouldn't want to get on an airline, go on vacation.
You're just being practical, right?
With
You're
all
just
our
putting,
traffic control rules. I want first
yeah,
airplane to land wins.
yeah.
But there are regulations we need to follow. But there are so many times that something will pop up, and we need a procedure for that, and we'll create a procedure. Well, more than likely, it's a one-off. I mean, you're never going to see that again. Certainly not that exact same form. And yet we create a procedure because the higher up we get, we want to make sure we feel that we understand everything that's going on below us and everybody's doing the right thing. And that to me is lazy leadership thinking. The way that I think great leaders would look at it, they're going to go and spend that time instead of creating procedure. They're going to go and spend that time getting their people more competent. And the way I kind of put this out to leaders, I say, think about it now. If somehow by magically tomorrow you walk into your business and everybody that works for you, I mean, everybody without exception, is the very best at their job in the world, what would your company look like? And, they can kind of see the steam coming out. They can't even, imagine, oh my goodness, that'd be just, then why aren't you spending more time working on getting to that? Do you ever get perfect? No. But can you get much better and closer? Yes. But you've got to spend time doing it. And that's the thing I find is a tough thing to get through to people. It's a whole different way of thinking about, leadership and building an organization. And at the end of the day, I mean, part of it is that, the old saying, this is nothing new. I mean, way back in what the Oracle of Delphi, they had on the side of the wall, leader, lead thyself, which means, if you haven't figured out how to lead yourself first, you're not going to have any chance of helping other people lead themselves. And so, um,
Uh,
figuring that out and then being able to see that the leadership position is your people, as I said earlier. And
mhm.
in many cases, and I now say that, I always, especially with the people in my applied leadership program, I mean, they're second, third level, whatever, executives in companies or managers or whatever. And, I tell them, I said, it's really a spectrum. I understand that you have a management job to do. You've got ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk things that have to be done to run your
Mhm.
business. But so that's one end of the spectrum. But how many times do you have a conversation with somebody that's working for you that it should be a leadership conversation? They're coming to you day after day after day. Well, what should I do here? What should I do here? Well, then our egos flares up. Woohoo, I'm needed. And you tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And so, and then they can't figure out why people don't grow. No. I mean, how about having conversations, asking them, what do you think you would do? Or what's the issue here?
Mhm.
How is it different from before? Or any number of examples and questions you could ask somebody. But the goal being put the leadership hat on and help them grow. Because the more they grow, the more confidence they get, the more fulfilled they feel. And they're happier with their job and their work. And you don't have to do it. So building that team up, building that competence in your team, and I think that gets short sheeted way too much. And I think that's one of the root causes of why we keep being stuck with this, this lack of what we really want is leadership, not management. But we kind of lump leadership and management into the same thing, and again, we get this whole idea that, oh boy, they need me, so I'm going to just jump right in and help them. And I see that a lot with people in my applied leadership program, that they'll come in and they'll say, oh man, I'm starting to see it more and more now. How many things are just come in and get dumped on my desk, or people will call and what should I do? And they start switching it around where they start, helping them figure it out
Mhm.
and become more competent. And all of a sudden their job becomes easier. I mean, they got a whole group of people underneath them that's very competent, and very cool things happen then.
Oh, that's you were headed right where I wanted to go next. So you're familiar with my ownership operating system and where I'm headed with my material, and I think this. So in phase 3 is elevate, which has a lot to do with the people. How do we actually? Because there's a whole the mechanical, build the machine, understand what you want, your goals, all this kind of stuff. But then you get to the point where it's the leadership team, and
Mhm.
then the leadership team, and then eventually replacing yourself.
Yep.
And I want to talk about what you've seen worked really well and where things struggle. And so I'll start with some of the biggest struggles I've been witnessing and watching with my group of coaching clients, where that transition period, Jeff, of like, okay, great. All right, Jeff, I'm aware of this dynamic. I want people that are competent. I want people that care.
Mhm.
How do I judge or assess my current team? And then, because like, and then eventually, so maybe we can kind of take. I'm going to throw out a couple things, and I'm trying to get better with my personal growth of just not spraying 1,000 questions at you. And Alan Bolio was just like, all right, Ryan. Well, he refused to answer one of my like monologue just riffs the other day. So like, there's this concept, or there's this dynamic, Jeff, of I want to be in the boardroom, and maybe I'll start from the outcome, and we can talk about like what you see as a successful journey to that outcome,
Mhm.
using some of your principles. So, because I believe, and I've witnessed it, I've experienced it. When you have leaders that care and they're competent, it is easier, and it
Mhm.
can become really fun, and you don't have to do the shit you don't want to do.
That's
And then
right.
your company becomes great. And then you like the cash flow. And then you don't have to be stuck in the middle of it. So, like, the outcome that you and I both rally around is like, especially you throw in 2030s and the ability to keep a good company and prosper when everybody else is, like we can talk about all the benefits that come from the outcome that is so worth what you and I want to help people with.
Right.
Okay, well, that's the outcome. And we can talk even more about the outcome. But like,
Mhm.
it's the challenge that I'm watching with people. They're like, okay, it's like they take the red pill in the matrix and go, I get it now. And like, and specifically as it relates to leadership, I'm like, I'm hearing you, Jeff. Like, okay, I need a chief revenue officer, a COO, and a CFO.
Mhm.
Look at what I've got right now. I've got loyalty to these people because I'm a good person. It's the family, I got a good culture, all the good morals and things that you and I probably subscribe to. So there's this like, well, we can't just pass judge people for things that were not clear expectations. So there's this transition period of like, now I have new expectations. So I have to somehow, as an individual and as the top leader, recalibrate my expectations to my group. You know what I mean? Because like, I can't just fire you because all of a sudden I had this epiphany and like, I'm going to come in the next morning and just fire you because you're not following the expectations that I now have. So there's this like recalibration phase, and then balancing competence and care.
Yep.
Does the question make sense?
I think you touched on it. I mean, the first thing is that if you're not clear about what you're trying to accomplish, how do you measure anybody? And boy, that's the first thing I see. I mean, and I call it purpose. I'm not a big fan of mission and vision statements. The companies that claim they have them, but they couldn't tell you what it means.
Would you say when we were at the coffee shop, you're like, you asked one of your clients and he had to go find it?
Yeah, he was starting to go to his file cabinet to pull it out. I'm like, never mind.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I just replaced it. What's your purpose? What's the reason that your business or organization exists? And that is critical. And that's not an easy thing to come up with. People can, they'll spit out something quick and like, okay, check the box, which is what they do with mission and vision statements most of the time. A process I've got, if people are interested in trying to figure out what their purpose is something I came up with quite a few years ago that's had really good success, is that you think about your business, take business or organization, and write down what's our purpose. And when you write that down, on the line underneath it should say, and pointing up to what your purpose was, why is that important?
Ooh.
Then you have to go and write, why is that purpose statement important? And then you've got to iterate on that at least 7 times. So every time you write something else down, the line below that says, well, why is that important? And why is that important? And to be honest, the first 3 or 4 of those will usually come pretty easy. I mean, you can probably knock them out in a day. Why is that important? Why is that? It's those last 2 or 3 that you do not expect to get them done in a day. Matter of fact, you're going to wake up at 3 a.m, or you're going to be in the shower, you're going to be working out at the gym, and all of a sudden it's going to, oh, that's why it's important. And you'll know you've gotten there when it gets visceral, when you get actually emotional about why that's important. And once you get that part of it, I tell you, that would put you ahead of, in my experience, I don't know, 90+%, probably closer to 99% of the companies I've ever worked with or ever seen, that they can absolutely tell you with conviction why that's important. And once you
thinking's hard, right?
What's that?
Thinking's hard.
Yes. Once you have that, I mean, Lee Thayer's thing, it says you'll know you have it when it has you.
Really, gosh, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, when that has you, where you just, well, once you've got that, and that takes time. This is not a process you can rush to get to it. But once you have that, that's the filter everything goes through. Does what we're doing right now get us closer to that, or doesn't it? Now you got something you can measure against. And if you're a leader and you got a company and you're trying to move up into, as you say, kind of like the chairman of the board role, and that, there's your filter. Is what my team doing getting us closer to where we want to get to? Are they clear about what our purpose is? And is that the filter they're using? Once you get that, it gets a whole lot easier then to be able to judge, are we making progress or not? But it takes the upfront work, like everything that's worthwhile. You got to take some time and effort and really work on it. I've worked with, and it's kind of fun for me, in Eau Claire, I drive around, I've probably got, I think 9 or 10, 11 companies I've helped them get their purpose statement around here, and I'll see a truck going by with it on it, or I'll drive by some building, one of the buildings has got their purpose statement out front, and that's cool to help companies figure out who they are and what they're trying to accomplish.
And not in a fluffy mission, vision, values. And that's why, everything you're like, all your isms and all the things that you're saying, just like, that's why I've enjoyed our conversations, because it's not the right word, platitudes. Like it's not the lip service of it's like
No, it's
real, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's real, right?
yeah.
Like people actually embody this stuff instead of just saying, just saying what they should. Do you have any good or favorite examples of like what someone's purpose or like one of the companies are that you've worked with?
Well, one of them I don't think they'd mind my sharing is Wind Technologies is in headquartered in Eau Claire here, and they're a big networking company in Upper Midwest. And I worked with a team of their executives, and we started out the first month, and they're putting all this stuff up on the whiteboard, what's important to us, and what we get through the day, and I like, all right, well, that's a good first step. I mean, well, let's get back, think about it. We'll come back next month. Oh, well, we're not done yet. Like, I don't know, we're not done. And I came back the next month, and they started to distill it down some. It was some cases it was 2 or 3 sentences. Other cases it was, but they still weren't there. But there were a couple of things that started popping up that kept being repeated over and over and over. And then the last month we got together, they had really kind of distilled it down. But the word connections and matter kept coming up and in different sentences. And finally, one of the people in the group says, "Why isn't it just connections matter?"
Mm.
And that's one of those situations you could feel the change. And I went around, there were 16 of them there.
Feel the change. Yeah, I love it.
And I went around each one of them, like, what does that mean to you? And each one of them, while it was the same, it was different. Connections matter. Well, it's a fun play on we're an internet company, so connections matter, right?
Yep.
But connections matter between our employees. Connections matter with our customers. Connections matter with our community. Connections matter. And so it's kind of fun. It doesn't always work out that way, where you can kind of play it off what the business does. But on the other hand, that's
But it's the feeling. I mean, like that's what I meant by the embodiment. Where like then like you're not pulling it out of your briefcase, right? Because like when you're sitting across from someone in your company and they're not embodying that purpose, then you're like you said, you're using it to measure and to filter against. How do you then balance? How have you experienced? I've got thoughts about it, but like balancing the competence versus care in light of that purpose. So let's say that someone's got that purpose nailed down, and now you've got your leadership team that you've kind of had this, okay, we got the light bulb for the main leader of the owner operator. And then okay, now we got our purpose. And now you've got your current leadership team that you're trying to, give them the red pill. And now you're balancing this competence versus care. And what's that process to judge whether they work out long term or not? And like how have you seen that?
Well, I think you mentioned it a couple of times. The first thing I'm a leader. I have that purpose now, and I go back. What do I mean by caring for my people? And that's something that it's worth taking a lot of time to. That a lot of times care just means, well, I care about my people. I'm going to take care of them. And even if you get somebody that's just doesn't fit or just isn't doing the job, or that cancer in your organization or your team or whatever, but you just keep trying and trying, figuring that sooner or later they're going to wake up, and yet deep down they're not going to. But they've got a family and they've got and I get that, but is that really caring? I mean, first of all, what does it say to the rest of your employees?
Right.
Right. When you really care about them, you're going to let somebody, and everybody knows who those people are. Caring, in my definition, and this is another one I got from Lee, was caring means not letting people default themselves. And I love that term, that not let them default themselves, that they're better than what they're putting out. And so if you've got somebody that's just, for whatever reason, not working out, not doing the job, always in that victim mentality, whatever that might be, that having that conversation with them, if you believe they do have the talent and the ability to do it, but there's just some dragon in their way, to sit down with them and have a conversation. There's 2 ways you can have that conversation. Sit down, you can bang the table and say, hey, pick it up or you're out of here, right? Or you can sit down and look, you're defaulting yourself. You're better than this. I see it in you. Do you? And then at that point, you've got to let them be responsible for their own career and their own life. If they, if they just still fight you and give you every example and every excuse and everything, then they're not a fit for you. I'm sorry. I mean, but who made that decision? They did, not you. And that's where we get stuck. I think part of it's maybe our Midwest nice. We just, the way I kind of tackle it with some of my executives and CEOs I work with, I said, at what point did it flip over where you're more responsible for their career than they are? And they sit there for a minute and they're like, that's what you're doing.
Shit, Jeff, why'd you word it like that?
Yeah. When did that happen? And why is that, and when you put it like that to them, like, oh yeah. On the flip side though, I've had multiple stories, and I just had one recently in applied leadership. One of the ladies, she's the service manager for a fairly large auto dealership here in Northwest Wisconsin. And she said she had a young man come in and a job in their service department. And she said, I know his background. He had a rough background, family life, but wasn't here very long. And all of a sudden he's showing up late. He's not hardly doing his work. He's, leaves early once in a while. And she said, before being in this program, I would have sat down and had the, hey, pick it up or you're gone. And she goes, I finally pulled him in one day and I said, look, you're defaulting yourself. I know your background. I know what's gone on, but you're better than this. Do you believe in yourself? And do you think you could be better than what you're doing? And so, we meet once a month with those groups. And the next month she comes in and everybody's asking her about it. And she said, it was like inventing a whole nother person. I mean, the next day he's in early. He's doing his work. He gets done. He's going and asking other people, what can I do to help? And she goes, this went on for like 2.5 weeks. And I just kept waiting for him to revert back. And he never did. And she goes, I pulled him in my office and I said, yeah, I'm so proud of you. What you've done is amazing. And she said, he literally broke down into tears and said, nobody's ever believed in me before.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I've heard that story, roughly the same thing, half a dozen times or more, where people that just had never had anybody show any faith in them, you show faith in them and challenge them. Well, to me, that's caring. Now, it could just as easily have gone and, still been, made every excuse in the book and whatever, and he wouldn't have fit and you would have had to let him go. But that's his decision for his life. It's unfortunate, but we can't take that on. And we do way too often. But also the flip side of caring, this caring means no, I see something in you. Do you? I mean, think back again, sports analogies are always so easy to use, but if you go back and read any book from players that played for great coaches, read any of the guys from like Lombardi, and what's the first thing they'll tell you is that they treated us all the same, like animals, like dogs. But what's the next thing I always write? He got more out of me than I thought I could get out of myself. And you hear that about all great coaches. Well, that's what great leadership is. You're getting more out of people than they thought they could get out of themselves. And to me, that's caring. It's not saying that you care for somebody that's just not pulling their weight at your company, but you give them every excuse why that you just, again, that gets back to ego. It means you have some fear of emotional discomfort or something, or you'd have to admit you were wrong hiring them, or there's something ego-wise there keeping you from doing what you need to do for your group.
So many good things, Jeff. And what I get encouraged by, and I just think about where I have failed at this dynamic multiple times in the past.
We all have.
I know, and it just gives me a stomach ache knowing what I should have done versus what I did. Is kind of pulling on a couple of the concepts that you and I are going back and forth on, is like having a clearly articulated outcome for that owner operator. So now you have your own goals. Then you identify the company's purpose within the goals of it can be mechanical of hey, you have to grow value, cash flow and value, but that becomes the true constraint. There are rules in every single sport, right? There are specific rules, but then you get to layer on how you want to play, which becomes your purpose. And then you go, okay, well, now we have a framework and a filter to measure people against, to give people the courage to have these conversations, because these are hard conversations, right? And I don't know if you and I talked about Alan Watts. I sent you a couple of those videos. We've been going back and forth with some of those on the text. And it's just the letting go, but not being passive, and letting go of that outcome where you're trying to and this has been something that I've been wrestling with for years, is I'm going to make sure that outcome is going to happen. And if it turns me inside out, and it's that's not healthy, right? So it's letting that person through care and love to them, but not owning the outcome. Because you're to use your words, you're not more responsible for their career than you are. or you're not more responsible for their career. And if you can keep the goal and the company as the ultimate benchmark, then you have the ability to have a courageous conversation with that person and let it be okay if they deselect themselves.
Well, and that's something I think that once you get in, one of the things I've heard from the people through the applied leadership program is that once they get this and they understand this and they really believe that, caring for others means not letting them default themselves, all of a sudden those conversations aren't hard to have because you have such faith, such belief and confidence in your own leadership, in what you're trying to accomplish, that if they can hear what you're saying and change their life for the better because you challenge, that's a huge gift you just gave them, right?
Right.
On the flip side, as you say, if they reject it, you've got to just, it's again, that ego thing, let the ego thing go. It's not your call. They have the final call in their life on what they want to do. And that's the part I think where most people, and I think how we get trapped in this, that, like I tell people in the applied leadership and yourself and myself, not bragging, but we've got to where we're at because we just can't imagine not doing a good job, right? We're just wired that way. We're just going to keep doing what's, keep learning, keep pushing forward. And the people that get sent to my applied leadership program are that way too, or the companies wouldn't invest that kind of money in them. But it's so easy then to think in our own heads that, well, everybody's that way. We just can't not be in that way, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked you that question, is like, is this a now thing? And and I think this is why having a group of people around you that is also thinking this way and not just striving for more revenue is so important, because what I have found, and it was an Alan Watts video recently, is like the more you become aware of the real way that reality works, it can be very lonely. And so it's,
but also very fulfilling.
Yeah, 100%. And then it's the game of one, right? Like we are the player, and it just allows us to recalibrate our energy with the people around us, with their goals, have better expectations, that takes that unbelievable burden and stress that we have to be successful for everybody else's outcome. And then I think it inverts the situation where we can actually use our company as a platform to really change people and the world in a way where we can actually put our fingerprints on it without having to be the one that actually does the work for everybody.
Absolutely. Yep. It's another theorism is the strategic distribution of problems.
Good God. I need to come up with an inventory list of just all of the things that you're saying.
But when you think about it that way, who owns what problem?
Oh my God.
And ownership means true ownership. There's no passing it off. There's no, it didn't work. I failed 2 or 3 times. I got every reason or excuse in the book. No, it's yours. Take it, own it. And when you find the right people, the A players, that's what they want, right?
Yeah.
You're the leader. Just tell me what you want. Be very clear about what we're trying to accomplish, and then get the hell out of my way.
Right. And then as a leader, be like, it's really like a parent. Like, let people watch the growth and find the joy in watching the people grow. Absolutely. And hit the outcome and identifying the goals. And I love it so much.
There's a paradigm to that too, that if you get good at leadership, you understand that. And this was we had Peter Schutz come talk to our group when I was still a member, like 3 times. And Peter was a former CEO of Porsche. It was Dr. Porsche that actually hired him in the early 80s. And Porsche at that time was really on life support. And it was Peter that went into CEO and resuscitated him. And one of the things he said, that in Germany, they have to, once a quarter, I don't know if it's still true or not, but by law, you had to have all employees come in once a quarter, your executive team, up on a stage, and the employees can ask you any questions they want for as long as they want it. And he thought when he first thought about it, he goes, man, that scared him to death. But he thought, well, now I'm getting asked questions I don't know. Maybe these are good things and I can learn from it. And, But he said the one that stuck with me, he said one of the questions was, one day a guy got up and Herr Schutz, we all work on the showroom or on the manufacturing floor here. We're building these cars and we're making, the money for the company. And we see all you suits up there with the big salaries and that. And I don't see what you're providing. And Peter's answer to me was just brilliant. He goes, yeah, you're right. You are making the money for the company right now. And if we were gone for a week or 3 weeks or even 3 months, 6 months, and this place didn't run like a top, then we've done a lousy job. But our job is, what about 2 years from now or three? Are we still going to be making the same cars? Are the tastes in what automotives are, is the technology going to be the same? Is people's tastes going to be the same? Is it? Our job is looking into the future and figuring out where we need to keep positioning ourselves. And I thought that was a really good way to put it. So that his job, he saw it as a CEO, was get all the people in the right spots where he didn't have to be there every day. And this is kind of the thing you talk about making an owner of, the chairman of the board. If you get this right, you have a purpose that everybody lined up with. You've got a great culture. You've got good people in all the seats doing a good job. You will find you don't have to be there any day. Matter of fact, if you have to be there every day, you're still doing a lousy job. Or you have to be there once a week, or you should be able to go. And I even tell the guys in my group, so that the bigger companies that, and even to I guess what you'd decide is medium sized, but if you can't be gone you take a month vacation and just leave your phone and leave everything and not worry about it, then you haven't built a good enough team yet. You don't have the purpose figured out right yet. You don't. But the paradigm in that is you can't be gone forever. Because as the leader, you're the one that realized how you built that. Leadership really means that putting the right people, having the right vision of what's going, where we're going, and all that, and holding people accountable to it. If you're gone for too long and you have people again that don't understand, that things revert back to, all of a sudden silos start going up, and there's arguments happening.
There's a Keith Cunningham's book, The Road Less Stupid. I don't know if you've read that. He's got this. The way I think about the ownership dynamic with the relationship with the business like this, if you have an ownership operating system where you're having monthly check-ins on all the things that are important, from the financials to the culture to the people, that are different than the operational cadences, and then you have your quarterly board meetings and you have your kind of more specific strategic annuals. It's the like when you take a merry-go-round at a playground and you're just cranking that thing, right? And because Keith says there's no such thing as a passive business. That's called the dumb tax. You'll pay the dumb tax, and he's got this nice Texan accent. It's so great, and he calls it the stupid or dumb tax. But if you step away, once it's humming, it'll slow down. But if it's going, you can just tap and you can look around, and all of your energy and concentration is not on it, and it's not through the pure energy of the muscle. So it's like this, all of the stuff that you're talking about. That's why this elevate phase in my operating system is the third phase. You're building that all the way up, and then the true escape velocity hits when you've got the people, the leadership team, and you've connected all these dots. When you said that if you've done this right, and it decouples the owner operator from specifically needing to spend the time in the geographic location of the office where they have all the monkeys. So when you've decoupled your cash flow and your time, then you can think about the business in other places. You can have check-in calls, and you have more time, geographic flexibility.
Yep.
And go ahead. I want to hear.
Well, yeah. And even if you have owners that don't want to be completely, let's say, checked out to just like be the head of the board.
That's an option. Yeah, that's good.
Right. One of the things I tell them, that even if you don't want that, you still want to be involved in the business, you need to create a ton of white space time. And by white space time, I just mean time where you're just sitting and thinking. You know what I mean? And they like, well, what? I mean, my example was when I was running SLE, we were right across the street from the library. And I would tell our office manager that I'm going to go over, I'm going to spend, a couple hours this afternoon over there. And unless this place is burning down, don't text me. And I would just take a quadrilled, notepad and a pen, and I'd go over, and then it's right on the Eau Claire River. I'd sit there, I'd sit in a chair, and people would, what did you think about it? I said, I didn't have to. I could never sat more than 5 minutes, and things would start popping in my head like, oh, geez, I should. Yeah. And within a couple hours, I'd have a couple pages of things on a notepad that, if I'm just staying task-based all day long, the ka-chunk, you never get time to think about that kind of stuff. And it took me a while, but I realized that's my job, is to think longer term and looking at where, what's going on out there. And all of a sudden, because of that, I would be setting up meetings and flying out to Silicon Valley and meeting with leaders of businesses out there and start making connections that if I hadn't thought about, I would have never known about. And then I
Hmm.
went back and all of a sudden we got a new opportunity. Well, some people say, well, that was lucky you were out there. Well, luck happens when you take action, only when you take
Yeah.
action.
And
And
you live and you give this space to think or space to like receive. I mean, how many of these great leaders from Benjamin Franklin to you name it, were like they're like it's in that white space of the margin where the ideas come. I mean, you're listening to the universe, and if you don't have time to listen,
yeah,
and it's just right in front of you.
look at some of some of the more famous ones. Steve Jobs used to check out for what 2 or 3 months a year,
Yeah.
go everywhere from Nepal to India to wherever, and just
Yep.
Bill Gates used to do that back in the early days of Microsoft, just
Hmm.
completely unconnected, just thinking. And it, in one way, it's well, I haven't got time. That sounds lazy. It's nothing lazy about it. I mean, if you look at the book, I think time really is money. I don't know if you've ever read that one.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they talk about in your role, especially if you're heading up a business or the owner of a business, that what kind of revenue should you be bringing in long term? Well, for what you're being paid, it should be a pretty big chunk. But the thing you need to realize, that's not going to happen every day. It's not like a sales guy going out and finding another order. You might work on something for 2 years. You think of something, you go out, you start meeting the right people, you put things in place, but 2 years later, all of a sudden you've got this big opportunity that turns out to be doubling your revenue for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
look at what does that mean to your time spent?
You're
But
looking for the step changes, right? Like you're like the not this linear growth, but like the things that will step you up that change the paradigm of your company to be aligned with future opportunities. I mean, it's what I find, Jeff, and I'm curious if your experience is this too, like with I'm going to give you some of my thoughts here, and then I think this will tie us into then the 2030 because I want to make sure we get to like how you're thinking about the next 5 years because it's all tied into this future thinking and strategies. So what I experience is that a lot of the owner operators that I work with like this type of work. Like most of my clients are like, I need more time to think. I want to have more time with the big, deep, meaningful relationships, whether that's suppliers or vendors or, the different people that can help them with ideas and strategy. I mean, like the whole, we can call it the visionary or whatever, but they enjoy this type of work.
Mhm.
And when I see if the machine is built where they can actually have the white space and the freedom and the flexibility and the thinking without the monkeys, with a good leadership team and a machine, they love their business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then,
We had a guy, it's probably, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago now that I get a call just out of the blue. Because I worked with companies for quite a while when I first started to bear down on just, for lack of a better term, rebooting company culture.
mm-hmm,
And I get this call from this owner, like say, I understand you work with companies and owners and can help us, figure out who we are and what we're doing and how to do it. And I said, yeah. I said, what's up? And he said, well, I started this business 27 years ago and I came in last week and turned the lights on. I thought, God, I hate this place. And I thought,
everybody listening in has had that moment. I
yeah,
have multiple
oh yeah,
times.
yeah, me too. I went through the dot-com implosion in charge of a high-tech company. I went through 2.5 years of, God, I hate this place.
Yeah. But the lights kept turning on, thank God,
Yeah.
right?
So I know, I thought, well, yeah, it sounds like we should get together. So I went over and I meet with them. Then they did like farm implement type stuff. And I go into his office and clearly a very profitable and company that's done well. And I said, so what's up? Just come in. I used to love this, but I just hate it. And I said, well, what do you hate? And he said, well, this. And his desk was full of, legal documents and HR stuff. And he's explaining. I stopped him for a second. I said, all right, well, what do you like to do? And it really kind of caught him off guard. He had to sit back for a second and think. And finally started, well, I like just being out with our farmers and our clients and see how they're using our equipment and looking at things we can go and maybe add and make better. And then within a few minutes, he was just all animated. And when he got done, I said, why don't you do more of that? And he's like, well, I just told you, I got all this. I said, look, I said, I understand that that you got legal things, you got HR things that, but you know what? I said, and I don't get it, but there are people out there in the world that love to do this shit.
Yeah, totally. Right. I
I
know.
mean,
Like
that's like, going to Disney World for them. And I said, I don't get it either. I mean, I hated it too. But I said, I look, and I bet you've got people in your office here who can take over most of this for you. You just give it to them and trust them and train them up. Or if not, if you need to hire another one, your financials are good enough. You could hire a person just to do this stuff for you, and go through the legal, like, okay, here's the things you might want to talk to them about, and just mark it up. And to his credit, over the next, it was like 8 or 9 months, he slowly handed things off. And yet, um, end of the story is though that it was about, I don't know, a year later, I think it was. I was out at the mall Christmas shopping, and I run in. I hadn't seen him in over a year, and he comes up and says hi, and then his wife goes, "Are you the Jeff West that worked with him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." She comes over, gives me this big hug, and it's almost in tears. Said, "Thank you. You gave him his life back."
oh, that's
And
so
I'm
cool,
like,
Jeff.
I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah.
I mean,
And instead of like, pulling the ripcord and ending up in the three-fourths of people that, regret the sale of their company because like there's this perception of the easy button that just doesn't exist. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, if I sell this thing, and it's like you either left money on the table, you left terms and conditions on the table, you left the impact and the culture and legacy that you wanted. Like there ends up being you're trying to people are trying to make this drastic easy out for I hate the legal and HR shit.
mhm.
And then you realize there was a lot of stuff I loved about this situation, financially or intangibles and legacy, personality, identity. And it took 8 months, but that question hit them between the eyes and unlocked the progress. And it goes exactly what I was saying. And I've been more and more focused, Jeff, of like I believe that there is a world where everything that we're talking about right now is possible for these people that own these companies. And like companies can change the community and the culture and people's lives. And as the economy gets harder, which I think you and I both believe will or get hard over the next handful of years, the people that believe this and can do this hard work will be life changers for the people that they touch. And if, what did you say? There was another leader, lead thyself. And it's like you start with your oxygen mask first, you do the hard shit yourself. And I think about all the stuff that you just said, like this is all possible if people are leading like what you're talking about. Cause like there could be a very dysfunctional way of delegating, not giving clear expectations, you know what I mean? Where you're like the perception of progress of delegation, and then the whole thing falls apart, 8 months later.
Delusion, yep.
Delusion. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of this, all of this, and makes what I think you and I have a shared passion for of is possible for people to have this beautiful relationship with their company and their people and their leaders.
Yep. Yeah. My advice to them, and people out of the ones I worked with, a lot of them is that just what do you want to do? What excites you? What part of it? And what gets forgotten, especially with companies that start out small and keep growing. When you're small, I get it. You got to have a lot of different hats on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You got to do. I mean, you got to do everything. But as you get bigger and you hire more people, what a lot of times it gets forgotten. They keep doing all that stuff, but they keep putting more hats on. And that's where they finally get to the point where they're just burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And so to back it up and say, well, what part do I really love about doing this? And
Mm-hmm.
I had an owner here, I don't know, 6-7 years ago that he loves skiing, wants to get out, out west skiing more in the wintertime, but just didn't think he could do it because in a way just didn't have the right, his team wasn't where he wanted it to be yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked about that. And to his credit, he did. He put together a really good executive team that he told me, I think it was last winter or the winter before now, that he was out skiing for a couple of weeks. And he said, while I was gone, two major things happened. They never even called and they handled it both great. Well,
that's so cool.
Getting the right team put in place with all these things we talked about. What's our purpose? What are we trying to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
Getting people that are there that buy into that and want to be part of it. That's allowed him the freedom to go out and do some other things he loves. And it's also freed him up to look at other business opportunities and things that he would have never had time
to. The white space. Yeah. The white space. Yeah. And what's fascinating too is like, because I like I think then there's been this confusion for some of the people that have followed me for a long time that I'm just a total finance junkie. And what happened, because like everything that we've talked about, Jeff, is like, that's the shit I love. The people, the philosophy, like the feelings, really. And then what I have found is one of the obstacles. There are three forces that I think people why they're stuck is the gut based decisions that they're making, unpredictable cash flow, and then they're stuck in the operations. We've been talking a lot about how they're stuck in the operations and leadership, but I've worked with a lot of the clients that I work with. The cash flow of the company becomes a serious constraint. You know what I mean? Like call it community, call it a few $100,000 and a few $1,000,000. Like people's lifestyles creep into that, and then you have like inventory and working capital, all these nuances that once they get visibility into the future, I've watched people, their anxiety, like, I mean, I've got 3 or 4 people right now that are hiring the CEO or like looking at it going like, I can afford this like $250,000 to $300,000 salary and still be fine. So then they're like, oh, like now I can do all this stuff that I really like. So it's not like life or death, to get them through that escape velocity to make all of this stuff possible. Which is why I say, like, building the mechanics and building the machine are part of that. Like you said, as you're kind of getting to that point, then it becomes an actual conscious choice. When you've eliminated all the excuses, you're like, okay, like I understand, like sometimes you have to do these things, but like now you have the resources to let go. So now what? Now what's the excuse, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm sure you've run into it too. I've run into any number of people over the years that sold their business and a year later told me, I wish I hadn't have done that.
Right.
It's
It's a good investment.
Who they are and their personality and I've got one gentleman just family business, 135 years, something like, just sold his business. But he had no family members that wanted it. Sold it to a guy that's worked with him for 40 years or whatever. And his conversation of mine right now is that, okay, what's the transition look like?
Yeah.
I mean, what he understands that if I don't have something else to take place of that,
Yeah.
purpose, the numbers medically and mentally are not good for people that don't have anything to replace it.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about all this stuff that you and I've talked about, which a business can be, it's like I've got this phrase now. So Shauna Core, have you ever read The Happiness Advantage?
Yes, I have.
His definition of happiness is one of my favorite. It's the joy we experience in pursuit of our fullest potential. And I think that a business is one of the most amazing vehicles for self-actualization because it's just everything on life on steroids, right? Like your leadership and your fingerprints of all the different things. It's just like this big canvas that allows us to do that. And that becomes really hard to replace in day-to-day life.
Yep. Yeah, I tell my daughters now that are kind of the early to mid parts of their careers that enjoy the process. I mean, one of my things was I always wanted to get to the next level, get to the next level, get to the next level. And while I can't say I wasn't enjoying it, I wish I would have appreciated it more at the time. Another theorism is that if you finally reach your goal, you didn't set your goal high enough. Because it's not about getting to the goal. It's about the process, the continuing on and keep pushing. And how do you keep getting better? How do you keep getting more competent at something? That continual learning. I mean, the short period of time I got to work with Lee, he was 92 years old, and he started every one of our meetings by saying, my goal here today is learn more about leadership than anybody else here. And I thought, man, at 92 and you've forgotten way more than I'll ever know, that was still his goal. That was pretty cool. And so
it's awesome.
It is.
It's awesome. Well, so let's say we got 10 minutes left. I want to kind of, because I think there's a liftoff here of like where you see the economy and businesses going. So I'll see if I can regurgitate some of the conversations that we've had. Then I'll put some of my beliefs in there because I want to hear how you think about it. So, because I believe that like, if we set our goals big enough, then it's a playground. This like life is a playground. You and I have talked about that. Like you said, I'm not going to retire because I think retirement's a goofy word. I'm just changing what I'm doing every day. And I think most people listening in would agree with that. And so what I believe is that by doing the work that we're talking about with the ownership operating system, tied into them with the people and the impact and all the purpose, all the stuff that we've been discussing, the possibility to ride the wave of a growing company that has outlasting impact is very high. And then at some point at the monetization of that, through an estate plan or an ESOP or an internal transition, like, you're constantly growing cash flow value and the impact is exponential. You don't have to ever part ways with it in any particular. I mean, like, we'll all kick the bucket, and at some point your cognitive resources will decline, but making sure that you have all those systems in place to create the optionality to do what you want until your game that you want to play changes. And then the moment you want to change that game, the whole thing doesn't fall apart. And then it's like this. I believe that it's harder to actually create something that's lasting longer than it is to sell something to PE, to be honest. Like, you could bundle it up and sell it, but it's harder to do everything you just talked about and what we were talking about. It's way harder to do this shit than it is to just package it up and sell it sometimes. So
Yep.
That's my belief. And then I believe that also, if we do the stuff that we're talking about and we have the leadership team and the systems in place like you've discussed, the ability to attract talent when talent's going to be hard to find, the ability to deal with very hard external events, whether it's AI or a currency crisis debasement or trade or inflation or all this stuff. So it's like this weird, what I want is to see if you can articulate it better than me, is all of the stuff that we're talking about becomes so compounding where it can be easier to attract the right people and be better. And mathematically it becomes one of the best investments when all the other investments are shit too. So, like, doing all the hard work ends up, and it's a process and it's a game, and all this stuff becomes like, well, why wouldn't you want to do all this stuff? Because of how many reasons it can be awesome versus the alternative when there is no easy button. So I'm trying to think of like how to launch this into, what do you believe and how do you snap some of these ideas together? And then how are you helping your group go forward amongst challenges as you see them coming over the next 5 years?
Well, you and I've talked about it some, and we've been followers and believers of the ITR, and Brian and Alan. We've had them out talking to our group in the years past. So if you're watching, hello. We've been following ITR for many years, and we use it their ABCD system and that for our companies, and use that a lot for how we think about where each business is and what they should be thinking about doing. They've written, it was over 10 years ago now, their book that that we're going to see a rough time here by the end of the decade. And there's only been a couple, at least years ago, that I would read. John Malden was another one saying the same thing. Now I see multiple articles a week about, there's something not good coming up here towards the end of the decade. We don't know what it is exactly. Everybody's got their own theory. So my goal is just, and I buy into that, it's demographics, it's financial. We're going to pay the price sooner or later for the debt we've run up as a country. There's so many things there. Us baby boomers, we're using more Social Security and more Medicare now, and that's not going to end for a while. And so, there are some real serious things coming up here that are going to have to be dealt with. And how does that play out? I don't know exactly. I know ITR believes we're going to go through a Great Depression. Something along those lines I don't think is unlikely. And then do you go through, all the different ways, we've talked about all the different things that could happen. And I'm not as concerned about exactly what happens. It's just having my businesses, making sure they're prepared. And, people go, what does preparation mean? Well, in my mind, that means how do you get as much productivity in your company as going as possible. And one of those legs right now that we've never had before is how do you use AI? How do you use it to do a lot of the mundane things so you don't have to hire more people? You can have AI doing a lot of things that, before as your business grew, you had to hire more people. How do you get your financials in order so that, if it gets to the point where it's so tough out there business-wise that margins get really squeezed, you can get squeezed the most and still be around versus your competitors that weren't ready for that.
Do you have any experience with that? Weren't you the only person in your industry that was standing after the .com?
The only one that was less than a few $1 billion in year annual revenue and being subsidized by another part of the business. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
We went through a rough patch. But so those are the things, it's this whole idea of being prepared and just.
How about people?
if you make
how
the
about,
argument that even that this isn't going to happen, none of these things you're doing are bad things to do for your business anyway. But it's other smaller, subtle things to look at too. I mean, how do you know who's your top three vendors, and how prepared do you think they are? Which are your most critical vendors, and how prepared do you think they are for this coming up? What if you lose your most important vendor? What does that mean to your business? And maybe you
I
should
love
be
it.
talking to them about what they're doing, and or maybe looking for a second source or a third source even. Or I mean, there's
Hmm.
things along those lines that we're starting to talk about. What things are you start putting in place to be ready for this? Because I do think, I don't know how we avoid rough patch. I mean, there's a lot of the fourth
Yeah.
turning books like that out there.
Yep. Yep.
We're at the tail end of this debt cycle, and to think it's different this time is foolish. So
Yeah. And that's where you do such an elegant way of reframing it. Cause like sometimes I get stuck in like, oh shit, mindset. And that's why I'm always having like, when I'm talking to Alan, I'm like, your book's called Prosperity in the Age of Decline.
yep.
And you said something really cool when we were at the coffee shop where you said, everybody's talking about these leadership and people problems. And you're like, my clients aren't having that problem. Cause like, I mean, and so they talk about like, cause people in this too be like, I think it becomes a like the way I think about all of this, Jeff, is like, it's a self-reinforcing spiral up
Mm-hmm.
or down, but in the middle is not really a choice. Like if you choose not to go like spiral it up and do the hard work, it's a spiral down. And good people and good leaders attract good people. And then they're helping you think about AI and talking to the vendors. So it's like, it's up, but then also down. So like, how do you think people and the culture play an impact in everything that we were talking about?
Well, and that's why my my members that even watch this will be laughing by now, because I've been harping culture for at least the last 10 years, for two reasons. One, I think it's just the right thing to do if you do it right. But two is, you can see this demographic trend coming. You can
Mm-hmm.
see where, I mean, heck, back even just running SLE up and through 2008, put an ad in the paper, you get 50 people that replied. Those days, now you put it in. I've heard from many of my members, you put an ad in the paper and you get nobody.
Right.
Somebody that's had 5 jobs in the last 8 months or something like that. And so if you think about it, if you get your purpose right, what you're trying to accomplish, and you get the right people on the team going, A players attract A players. Good people want to go work for good companies. You look at companies, and unfortunately, I've run into a handful of them over the years where they're just poorly run. And for all the reasons, I mean, who's the first people to leave companies like that? It's the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one client tell me one time, he said, yeah, the only reason the poor ones stick around, they're like gum on your shoe. They're just too lazy to even go look for another job. Well, they'll
That's
complain and
awesome.
bitch and moan all day long, but they're not leaving.
I'm going to use AI in this transcript to come up with an inventory of all of your phrases because they're so good.
Well, I mean, and so, and to the credit of the companies in our group, they've done a nice job with their businesses. I mean, it's still tough for them, but I mean,
Right.
across the board, most of them, if not all of them, they have people calling them like, hey, are you hiring? Are they, because, if people work at a place they really like, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to tell family, they're going to tell, or you're a customer of a place that, wow, this place is different. How, are you looking for somebody? I get stories like that quite often. And so, yes, is it still tough for them? It is, in a way. I mean, there's certain specific skill sets that are still hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
But, for the most part, no, I don't think they're having the problem that most companies are having. I mean, I had one manufacturing company here, winter before last, lost 3 of their people to a big multinational company in town here because they were paying $2 an hour more. 3 months later, they all came back. And he said, they're my best evangelicals out on the floor now going, oh, you don't want to go there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
a big deal. I mean, to walk
Yeah.
away from $2 an hour difference at, salary. But they came back because this place treats us like people, and they would like working here and all the things they do for us. And you don't get that there. It's just work, 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 work. And yeah, you make some more money, but it was just not fun and
Not
fulfilling.
worth it. Not
No,
worth it.
right.
I think a lot of the concepts we're talking about here about how we look at the future is, for me, like, because I know if Tyler's listening, the shout out to him. health guy that's also tied into, he's doing a lot of stuff with AI. But like when I think about health, Jeff, and I can tell, like, you've been disciplined for a long time. Like when you have that routine and that discipline, it's still hard work every day, right? Like it's like you're just doing the hard shit. However, what I've experienced is when that external shock happens, like I broke my leg 15 years ago, or whatever the hell it was. I crutched into the gym. Or when you sprain this, or your rotator cuff hurts now, or like you didn't get a good night's sleep, like there's a forcing function of mechanism to like deal, like because everything else is stable, it's to deal with that shock in a more appropriate way versus like, I also can't do other things and I'm trying to deal with the one thing that happened. You know what I mean? So it allows like to us to handle all of the adversity that you're talking about in an appropriate way instead of having to manage the basics and the random thing that's also very much a big external threat.
Well, and adversity is the right word there. I mean, it's another thing throughout Lee's book. He talks about competence, but right after, every time he says that, competence in the face of adversity. Because if you don't have adversity, how do you know if you're competent or not? I mean, there's a lot of companies. You start a company at the right part of the cycle in a business cycle, and you can do really well, even if you're not that good of a leader or not that good of a company. But longer term, no company or organization or even an individual can be better than the leadership. It's impossible long term when you work it backwards.
So good.
When you think about any situation and work it backwards, it's going to always come back to decisions that were made by the leadership of that organization or a leadership of yourself. I mean, what decisions are you making? What habits of thinking are you stuck in that are keeping you from doing the things you should be doing instead of and most people don't think of thinking as a habit. But we think about smoking is bad and exercising is good, but thinking is a habit. We can get really stuck in ruts and believe we see the world, in our way as we see the world is right. And right up until it beats us up, side the head. And another author I like and person I like is Cy Wakeman, and her quote is that feel free to argue with reality. Only know that or just know that you only lose 100% of the time. Like if you're okay with that, then go ahead and fall. Yeah, so it's it's this whole knowing who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and then Lee talks over and over and over about preparedness. A lot of times, people go, "Well, preparedness for what?" And preparedness for anything. Well, how do you prepare for anything? Well, I mean, that gets back to, are your people really, really competent? It's back to this competence thing again. If they're competent, when adversity hits, they're going to be prepared. They'll figure it out. If you have a bunch of people you've been letting hang on and stick around that aren't competent or always have excuses, they're going, oh, the economy is bad, and that's the excuse, or this, or the.
Self-reinforcing.
You look at many of the best, greatest companies ever created were created during downturns. I mean, those people didn't get stuck in the economy's bad, so I'm not. I mean, it's these dragons we keep putting in our own head that keep us from being who we really could be, and so.
Wow, I think we should end on that note. That was beautiful.
Dragons plug in.
That was so good, Jeff. I will put the website, Applied Leadership, and the links in the show notes. Anything else that you want to leave with the listeners?
No. I just, if you think about leadership, I would just say that, really think about it, because I don't think, maybe I'm biased because it's the business I'm in now, but the reason I got drawn into it, because I think if you do think back at any situation, it always comes back to decisions we make, which is leadership. I mean, it's either for ourselves personally, for the organization, or the businesses we're in. I mean, you look at any situation, look at companies that have gone, good companies that went FUBAR. You can work it back and find out leadership changed and all of a sudden bad decisions were made or egos got in the way or whatever. Look at companies that are successful or organizations that are successful, and you work it back and it's always good leadership. I mean, it's the root.
I couldn't agree more. And as my clients in the coaching program have been working on their playbooks, and then we're getting to this last phase of the leadership team, and I'm watching a lot of people build up their senior leadership team and the potential CEO to replace himself. It's like, I'm like, it's not my money, it's your money. But like, if there's one place to overinvest, it's here. whether it's invest in time or care or money or all of it, like it don't shortchange this because it's not gonna go well.
Well, that's just, I mean, that's the irony of how applied leadership got started. I mean, didn't plan this. I mean, we're out having for one of our business partner meetings, having 10 years ago or whatever now, that beer with a few of the members, and they were all lamenting that they'd been sending people to these leadership programs, the 3-day seminars, and they just didn't think they were getting a really good return on investment. And my smart aleck response was, really, you expected to? And one of the members, one of the CEOs looked at me and said, well, how would you do a leadership program? And I thought, just that's kind of a fun thing to think about, not thinking anything would come of it. And I knew that the couple things that right away would be based on a peer group. So I love the peer group format. People from all these different businesses come in and they think, I got car dealerships here, and I got the fine arts center here, and I've got technology company. What have I got in common with them? And after about 2 or 3 months, they realized only about 95%. And so I knew that. And I knew that it'd be on Lee's book and Sai's book. And then the last piece was, how do you make it different where it really makes a difference? And it came back with it. It's going to be 1 day a month for 2 years. And I thought nobody would sign up for that. That's just, no, that's too long. And to their credit, they said, let's give it a shot. And now I can't get it to stop.
Well, and that's it. So it sounds like, whether it's the book about in the Dragons, like what would you have in the children's book, or what would a leadership team or a program look like? I think there's these questions that send you on a goose chase. And
Yep.
The one that I want you to think about, because as you're trying to figure out how to pass on these ideas and concepts, is if you were to have an AI Jeff that has embodied all of this stuff, what would be the principles and the framework and the curriculum for Tyler to help us figure out how to extract all of this stuff into an AI bot, an AI program of Jeff?
Tyler's already got he calls it Theota. He's got Lee Thayer into AI, and you can call him up, talk to him, ask questions, and it's Lee. It's the voice. It gives me the chills to think I'm talking to Lee.
Weird. Again. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure that there's probably way smarter people than me. I'm, like, I forget who was it said, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and I can help pass that along and cause some ripples. Then that to me, that's the fulfillment for me.
And that's what's fun talking to you, because it's all practical. You know what I mean? Like you're in the trenches. It's fun, and I'm excited to meet you in your group next month.
Yeah,
this is gonna be fun.
Looking forward to having you. Yeah, and being a part of it. And yeah, I think what I say at the end of Casablanca, Louis, I think this is the beginning of a wonderful friendship.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. I appreciate you. Appreciate your time, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate it too.